before we begin, look around, and I want you to know exactly the right people are here today. No more, no less. In this case, the story that the gospel writers remembered and wrote maybe added a second about this as a story. You know, probably story on those. Real. The story's real. At this parable, that we understand that what Jesus says here is not instructions on how to live a better life. This, in fact, if you this lesson, just pick up the word to Google or even and said, "What is this about?" How to live together, how to how to judgment. Is that right? Live. Now remember where Jesus was. Jesus was in a time where Romans were there occupying the land very viciously, very powerfully. I mean, there were crucifixions regularly because somebody had violated what the Romans expected people to do. And they'd also co-opted the priesthood to become the interveners, to be the people who kept the culture going, i.e. kept a great separation between the poor in the land. And in fact, the Romans allowed the priestly class to become very wealthy. Now, that's where Jesus was. And there were people there who wanted to pick up swords and become violent. I think we might even call some of the people that Jesus was in terrorists today. And Jesus was in the midst of that. So even though today you might hear a variety of ways of self-development or organizational development, better ways and processes of being together as human beings, I don't think that's what Jesus had in mind. Because today, when we're thinking about personal development and organizational development, we generally think about three things. How do we get more wealth? Right? And I'm not condemning that. I'm saying that's part of, right? How do we get more profit for our investors or for the owners, or maybe if we are sharing profit with the employees, for all of us, right? More profit or more power. I mean, isn't that what elections are about, is getting more power or more notoriety? I mean, why do you think that they spent 6 years creating this Barbie movie that we're available to us today, right? Barbie, a doll? Why Barbie out of all the dolls that are possible? Because Barbie has great celebrity status. And now the woman playing Barbie is going to inherit that celebrity status, and that's what she's about. Now, when does power, wealth, and notoriety, celebrity, become important to us? When? What's that? Well, the elections, what? Just take a look at the election. What's the biggest message of elections? especially at the higher level. If you don't vote for us, what's coming to an end?
More taxes.
More taxes. The whole economy is going to come to an end. To take more taxes from you. Is that fear? Fear? Yeah. Vote for us, because if you don't, dire things are going to happen. So fear. So when we are in fear, what do we want to do? What do we use when we're afraid? Power, wealth, and notoriety. Don't you know who I am? You can't stop me. I am. Those are three things that we human beings use when we are afraid. Now, lots of personal development, organizational development is there to help us do those responses to fear a lot better, a lot more humanely, a lot more open and honestly. But those things will always, ultimately, fail. What's the other big movie on today? Oppenheimer, right? Now, I'm trying to think. I don't think there were many people who were aware of what happened in 1945. Now, you'll hear, if you see the movie Oppenheimer, or if you read the book from American Prometheus, you'll discover that here the test, the Trinity test in Alamogordo, New Mexico, was in August of 1945. The first atomic bomb ever. And nobody knew that it would work. And so they were astounded that it worked, and Oppenheimer is blown away, literally blown away mentally by the thrust that he experienced. Within 6 weeks, it was used in Japan. And 110,000 people, 2 cities decimated completely. But the end of the war in Japan stopped, saving maybe millions of people. And Truman was delighted after Hiroshima and Nagasaki, as were a lot of people. And maybe even we would have been if we were there watching. Now, would you say that that's an example of power in our world? That kind of power, has that made us a safer people? Are we safer today because of that? I'm not condemning it. I'm just asking, are we safer because of that kind of power that we have? As a nation, as people? And so the point that Jesus is making is not get better at getting wealth, power, and celebrity. It's not just a matter of being better known in the world, getting greater power, or having more money. And if you look around today, especially in American Christianity, wealth, power, and notoriety are part of a lot of Christian teaching. You heard? I don't think that's what Jesus had in mind, because he knew that wealth, power, and celebrity, notoriety will always fail if you're trying to move away from fear. The more money we have, the more afraid we are somebody's going to take it from us. Right? Through taxes, or somebody claiming they have the answer and giving us 31% annual interest. We're afraid. The more celebrity we have, the more well-known we have, the more afraid we are that we will lose it. And the more power we have, and you can see it's not on the right or the left. It is the whole political world. What happens when they are in power? they have to spend most of their time trying to get back in power or retain their powerful seat because they are afraid they will lose it. And they project it onto us and remind us that if you don't elect me, the world's coming to an end, whatever thing you're afraid of. Jesus knew that. The way to get out of fear is not by getting more power, more money, or more celebrity status. It's by letting all of that go and recognizing that we are loved by the Creator. We have been loved by the Creator, and the Creator has known us from the very beginning. What did Jesus say when the lawyer came to him and said, what are the most important laws for our culture? How can I best please God? What did Jesus say? You know it. What did he say? Love the Lord your God with all your heart, your mind, and strength, and love your neighbor as yourself. What is the source of strength for all of us? Love. You could say God because John said God is love. Now, what does that mean for us? So Mary and I are driving out from Astor Street. If you know Laguna, you know Astor Street, right? Catty corner from the Laguna Art Museum, right? And you know that Cliff Drive comes in, and here's Highway 1 coming up here. And if you're familiar with traffic in Laguna Beach, you know that you can't turn from Highway 1, Coast Highway, onto Astor Street, right? So we're coming from Astor Street, going to turn down Highway 1. And here's somebody, obviously, didn't know Laguna Beach, cuts right across and turns to the right. What's my first response? Idiot. And I want to open the door and go out and say, you can't do this. But what's the best response?
Your horn.
That would be a way of exercising power. And what could happen, as Mary pointed out to me? A gun, right? Well, it could be something. What are you doing to me? You're trying to exercise power over me? I don't. Laguna's a little different these days in the summer, right? So, but my point is that reacting with power, trying to tell somebody what to do, very often gets a response back. Now, all I respond thinking about it, reflecting on it later, was, well, I hope that he can make it across Cliff Drive without hurting himself. And he did. And I got out of the way. But that's a little example of how to respond to something that could cause fear with something that's like love. It's a kind of a surrender. And how can we surrender? What do we have to believe in order to surrender? That we are going to be all right. Now, what's Jesus' message to everybody he meets? You are going to be all right. Is it? Isn't that Jesus' message? You're going to be all right? You're going to be all right. Why? Because God loves you. And because of that, you can love your neighbor. And when the question was, who's your neighbor, what did Jesus immediately come up with? The worst enemy of his friends, the Jewish folks, the Samaritan. You can love even your enemy if you know you're going to be all right. Why do we have to have so many missiles with nuclear bombs that are 100 times as powerful as the first atomic bomb. Why do we have to have those? Why? As a deterrent, because we do not believe that without them we are going to be all right. So my question, and Jesus' question, is, are we going to be all right? And so Jesus throws this parable out, this almost a Zen-like koan for us to contemplate. When we can identify the wheats and the tares, the good and the bad, should we go out and just eliminate the bad? You know that during the Bay of Pigs, now you do remember the Bay of Pigs, right? And the missile crisis. Do you know that the military chiefs were saying to people making the decisions, we should go bomb Cuba, knowing that that would cause a response from the 68 armed missile centers in Cuba that were freed to push the button at any time they felt fear. And the justification was that this would cause the beginning of a nuclear war, which would cause 10 million people in the United States to be killed. Right? But it would cause 110 million people in Russia to be killed. And their belief was, and we would win because of that. I'm not trying to judge that, but I am suggesting that that came from a sense that we would be okay if we exercised our power and won. But the reality is, even then, we would be all right. I can give you many examples of that. If Mary were here, she would tell you about the Native American experience from 1492 on. And one of the bottom lines is, but we are still here. We are still here. And so what I hear from the parable today from Jesus is, and you can go home and just start listing off all the places that we should be afraid of: climate change, economy, potential recession, threats from abroad, ChatGPT, white nationalists, liberal Democrats. Just put them all up there. And then ask yourself, if Jesus were here today, whispering in my ear, would he say, you'll be all right? You may not win. You may not have the most money in the world. You may not be the Barbie of tomorrow. But you will be okay. Because for 8.5 billion years at least, God has loved what God created and what we became out of that creation. And God will continue to love us, providing more than we can ask or imagine. That is what I read and hear when I listen to that parable. So the question I think Jesus leaves them and us with is, given all that you're experiencing today, given all the pressures, all the knowledge, all the fears that are running around, do we believe that we're loved by God? And do we believe that we're going to be okay? And can we love our neighbor? Thanks be to God.